Hello and welcome to Shendu.org. I received an interesting email from one of our readers a few days back, and this is what it is. How do I look up and return a value based on multiple criteria? Now, anytime I see something like this, I am always keen to learn more about the problem and see if we could fit into one of the patterns on VLOOKUP and other lookups that are discussed on the site. And this one looked quite interesting, and it has a little bit of human resources bent to it, and I thought it would be an interesting problem to discuss in the video. Let's read the thing. It says, I have a spreadsheet, let's call it terminations, with the names of casual workers and dates when their contracts ended. In another spreadsheet, let's call it hires. I have a similar list of casuals who are being hired. The challenge I have is to check if a casual has been contracted before in the hires spreadsheet. Now, VLOOKUP returns the first instance only if it finds a match, but I also want to compare the last exit date versus the current hire date to see if the casual is actively contracted and not looking at being paid for multiple tasks, which we don't encourage. Obviously, right? You don't want to pay the same person twice, and this kind of a thing would not really happen in a large corporation or even a mid-level, mid-sized corporation, where you probably have some sort of a hiring process and a dedicated centralized database to keep track of the staff. But if you are running a more ad hoc operation, or you're running a process where you bring in a lot of temporary or casual staff who come in and go every now and then maintaining a system for that is too tedious, and because of the nature of work, it's probably not worth it. Let's say you are constructing a building and you hire a lot of manual labor to do the labor work, and now what could happen is, because of the floating nature of this work, sometimes you may need 200 people to do certain task, whereas sometimes you may need only 50 people. So maintaining a dedicated employee database is not worth it. So what usually happens is you either maintain a spreadsheet, or worse still, you would maintain a paper-based trail to keep track of who is coming and who is leaving. And that could lead to a potential scenario where you end up paying same person twice because you have a very inefficient process. So let us say we have something like that, and how do you avoid this kind of a hiring boo-boo? So let's say we have a list of previous hires, the people who have been hired and their start and end date of hiring. So this is casual Cynthia. She started on 14th of Jan 2016 and ended on 14th of March 2016. Likewise, we have some data like this, and we also have some data for new hires, and we want to make sure that anybody here, these are the potential new hires, we want to check that these dates, for example, casual Doug is starting on 18th of May 2017, and we want to make sure that casual Doug, who has been employed a couple of times, maybe once, but other people have been employed multiple times, Doug as well multiple times, hasn't been on our payroll more than once. Okay, so that's the thing. I think I made a small mistake when I was setting up the test data, because as you can see, all these dates are in 2017, whereas none of these dates are in 2016. So potentially there won't be any overlap. So what I would do is I'll pause the video for a minute here, and I'll go and make some changes to the data so that there are some overlaps. Okay, so I made some changes. I have advanced the dates on the previous hire so that there is some potential overlaps between these two. Now let's go ahead and see if we can fulfill all of these hires. Let's say we want to hire casual Doug from 18th of May 2017 with the contract end date on 18th of October 2017. Can this hire be fulfilled? Now the manual way of doing this would be, we would look at the start date 18th of May 2017, and we want to make sure that Doug hasn't been employed by us in any of the previous contracts where the contract end date is on or after 18th of May. Okay, so let's look at Doug, and very quickly we can filter by Doug, and we can see that Doug has been employed for a couple of months in 2016 October, and then he started a new contract on 11th of December 2016, and his latest end date is Jan 2017. So he hasn't been employed actively on our records after 11th of Jan 2017. So we could potentially hire Doug. But doing that manually is not a very good system, because we could potentially have hundreds of people in both of these lists, and doing that kind of filtering is not a repetitive process. So what we want to do is we want to set up a formula that can do it. And obviously, as my reader has pointed out, this kind of thing cannot be done with VLOOKUP, because what VLOOKUP does is it only finds the first occurrence of Doug and tells you that that ended on 5th of December 2016, whereas what we wanted is the maximum date for Doug, and then check that. There are many ways to do this. We will use one of the methods first, and then we will discuss other potential methods, and then we will go from there. So we can say what is the maximum end date for Doug. So this is maximum of end date where name is equal to Doug. So what we will do is we will write it like this: maximum of if person name, now that will always mean B, column B6 through B23, is equal to, so if the name is Doug, then give me the end date, right? So that's that. And we want to say, if is this end date less than the current contract start date. Okay, so that's that. Because this is an array formula, what we are doing is we are using an if formula inside max, and Excel would not work if you just press enter. You have to press Control Shift Enter to tell Excel that, hey, this is an array operation, and do it right. So we will press Control Shift Enter, and then it is true, because casual Doug has ended his last contract on sometime in Jan 2017, so we could potentially hire him. So that's true. And when you fill down, you can see there are some false. For example, casual Charles, which we can filter here, and you can see that Charles has been employed several times, and the last contract end date is 25th of May 2017. And here we are trying to hire him again from 12th of May, and this is not possible because that person has been employed. So this is one way to check whether someone is employed or not, by using a max if formula. We could also use some other type of formulas. For example, we could use COUNTIFS formula to check. For that can be done by can hire 2. This is the second way of doing this. So we can say COUNTIFS in this range, that. Now all of these would be absolute references. So wherever the name is Doug, wherever, I don't know what I did here, wherever the end date should be less than that. Now you can't directly do it like this, so what we will do is we will say within double quotes less than ampersand G6. So what we are asking is count how many rows are there such that Doug is there and his contract end date is less than the contract start date. Now what this will tell us is there are 2 such occurrences, and what we want to check is whether this is the total number of times Doug has been hired. So we could simply say COUNTIFS F4 Doug, because that's true, that's there. And what happens is wherever that is not true, for example here Charles, for Charles there are I can select that portion and press Control equal to see what that value is to. That is 2. So for Charles there are 2 occurrences where his contract end date is before the start date of this one, whereas he has been contracted 3 times. So because 2 is not equal to 3, we will get false. So this is another way of doing this. This is not an array formula, so it is probably an easier one to understand and apply. Okay, you could also tweak the COUNTIFS formula in a way so that you don't have to write 2 COUNTIFS. You can just write one of them and get the result or something like that. But that is that, and yeah, we get all matching values in both cases. Okay, so that's that. You could also instead of using a formula, you could use conditional formatting to just highlight the ones that should not be hired. You could put them in red color or something. That's what I call as can hire 3. This is technically not a column, it is basically a conditional formatting rule applied on that range. So you could visually inspect and then do something, because what you usually do when you have a formula like this is you would first write the formula and then you will filter out all the false values or no values, and then you would find out why this is even happening, why that person is even listed here. Is there a process gap that is creating this kind of a scenario or something like that? So you could potentially do the same thing with conditional formatting. You could just select that range, go to home, conditional formatting, new rule, and set up a formula based rule where the formula is essentially one of those COUNTIFS or max formulas. So I'll write the formula here. What we want to do is we want to check that this combination of name and start date are matched here, and the start date should be greater than the end dates for all values. So we will say we could use maximum of if conditional formatting by default is array based calculations in formulas, so you don't need to do any control shift enter here. You whatever formula you write, it is by default supposed to work as an array formula. And here this reference is always in column F, so I'll just say $F6. It has to be relative on the row number, because then the conditional formatting can apply for relevant name in each row. If that is the case, then we take the end dates, and this maximum value, this is going to tell me what is the latest contract end date for each employee here, and that should be less than the start date, which is in column G. So like that. Well, since we want to highlight people who should not be hired, we could say is it greater than or equal to, and then we will say fill it up with yellow color, and that will highlight all the false values, as you can see, and those are the people who should not be hired. So this is another way to handle that problem. So we could use formulas, we could use both maxifs and countifs formulas, as well as you could also set up a conditional formatting rule that encapsulates the formula as a formatting condition, and helps you with that. The other option that I would suggest using in such a scenario is setting up a data validation. Now let's say you have cleaned up this and there is no more persons who should not be hired in the list, and then every time you want to hire someone, you will go and type in their names here, and then you want to make sure that any data that you are inputting further down, it doesn't violate the conditions. That is, you won't even have such input, right? If you try to type in this data, for example, Excel would throw a warning and make a huge fuss about hiring casual Clyde, because such a hire cannot be fulfilled in the first place. So that's what that way you will prevent such data from even existing. So how to do that? Well, that can be done in multiple ways, but the easiest that I would suggest at this point is, because this data set itself, the previous hires, it keeps growing, right? So far we have assumed that it will always be in B6 through B23, but that's not the case. Every time you kind of try to hire someone else, any old contracts will be taken from here and they will be moved there. So this is a growing list, so that means anytime you have to redo this, you would have to go back and change all your formulas, which is a nuisance. So why don't we first convert this into a table? So we'll select all of this and press Ctrl T to create a table from here, and let me clear the formats. I don't know why I did that, but let me format these dates so that we can make sense of them. Alright, okay, so we have a table. We'll give this a name. We'll call this as EXISTA, existing. Okay, and this can be a table, but I don't think this should be a table. You can just leave this as an input range, and so what we want is, once this is a table, we could potentially write formulas as structured references. We will simply say existing name, existing end date, instead of B6 B23. That way whenever this is growing on the left side, our formulas would automatically readjust. So now that this is a table, we could set up data validation rules easily. What we will do is one more step before applying the data validation rules. We'll select all this range, we go to formulas, define name, and names. We'll give this a name called names, which is quite ironic, but that's what it is, and it refers to the entire table column. If you're thinking, why are we naming it here, why don't we just use the structured reference? It's because data validation would only accept named ranges as source, not as structured names. So that's a bit odd, but that's what it is. So we'll select the end date as well, and dates. Okay, so we have two named ranges, each referring to the table columns, and what we will now do is we will select one of the rows. We can apply this in for the entire range, but I'll just show you in one place and then you can understand how this works. So I'll select both of these, in the condition that we want to set up is, we'll go to data validation, and we can allow any value, but what we want is, we want to have a custom value, custom validation criteria. The criteria should be something like this: is this name and date combination, is it allowed? Okay, so that's what the condition here. We will simply say, we could use our maxifs formula again. I'll use the maxif criteria because that is max of if names is equal to that one, and that's again, just like conditional formatting, this is uses a bit of relative referencing with array processing, so we would make sure that that is anchored to column F, and then if that is $F14, then we want end dates. Okay, so this will give me a bunch of end dates that correspond to whatever name that you have typed, and this name, the end date should be before. So the validation criteria should be before the start date. Okay, so that's that, and this will be like that, right? But this won't be sufficient, because what happens when you're typing in data is, you type the name and at that point the date is empty. So what happens is, your end date would be, let's say, 12th of November 2016, that is not less than blank, which is 0. So we would have to have an OR condition where it simply says G14 is equal to blank, or F14 is equal to blank. So what we are saying is, if either of them are empty, then we are good. We don't need to worry about this condition at this stage, because because you're still entering the data. But the moment both of them have data, then check if this thing is satisfied, right? So that's that. And the error alert is stop, you have already hired this person. Okay, so I think we have already, maybe I'll simply say already hired. We have and click OK. Okay, at this stage this condition has been set up. Only thing is we have set it up only on these two cells. So let's as you can see, this is false. That means casual Clyde shouldn't have been hired in the first place. So I'll go to this and press enter, entering the same data again, and we'll get that message. So it won't even let you enter that combination. So we can now delete this and then hire someone. That is okay. But the moment you hire casual Clyde, it's an error. Okay, so we could retry and change this or delete it, and that'll allow you. Likewise, you could delete that. That's still okay, and you can go here. It will let you because we haven't specified the end date, but the moment end date is 19th of May 2017. I don't know what his Clyde's last date is. I think it's 8th of June. So 19th of May is still within the last hire period, and it should not allow, and that's what we get, that error. But if I change this to June, we're all good because his last contract ended on 8th of June. So you could use a variety of techniques, conditional formatting, formulas, or even data validation to both highlight as well as prevent such errors from occurring. So I hope you find this video useful. If so, give us a thumbs up or like, and subscribe to the channel for more such useful information on using Excel formulas to do some awesome work. Thank you so much for watching. Check out the video description for an example workbook link and discussion about this article. Thank you. Bye bye.